You're listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.
Hi, this is Louisa Tanner Munson, and this is another part of the Chiron series, I guess. So we're moving on to what happens when Chiron is in the third house natally, i.e. where it is in your birth chart. If you're born with Chiron in the third house, this is the section for you. And as we move through the information in this section, I will cover at the end what happens when Chiron is transiting through your third house. So what that might mean. So this is quite an important one, really. It's quite normal to be shy and to feel shy when there's a third house Chiron thing going on for you, because the third house is very much to do with communication and sharing. It's about your nearest environment to you, your neighbours, your family, your friends, your cousins, etc. And it's about learning and school. So it's really about early childhood development in many respects. And it's a social sort of outward-looking phase. If you think about the third house, the star sign that represents the third house is Gemini. And if you think about Gemini being, it's about communication, it's fluid, it's a mutable sign, so anything goes. It's a sign of duplicity, i.e. with Gemini, the Gemini energy, there are often many different opinions and voices. So if you apply that to your childhood, if you've got a third house Chiron in your natal chart, it might be that your early environment wasn't all Gemini and, that it wasn't all chatty and friendly and really, really busy. It might be that it could be that the busyness and the friendliness of it and the hustle and the bustle and the colour of it actually led to you feeling insecure. So whatever the Gemini third house issues create the wounding that you may experience. Now, Gemini's stroke the third house is very much to do with learning and early school. Because that's where a lot of our opinions get formed, and that's where we often make our first friends, and it's where we first learn to... I mean, obviously, I think you should be doing a lot of this at home before you go to school, if you go to school at all. But, for many people, that is when your world opens up quite suddenly. So having Chiron here as the wounded healer represents that it might be that you have issues with learning and that find learning quite challenging, or found the learning environment that you were in made it very difficult for you to learn. It didn't suit you, because it doesn't necessarily suit all. It's crazy to assume that one style is going to suit everyone. And unfortunately, if you're one of those people that it doesn't suit, it can be a very lonely experience having to go to school. So Chiron here can make you quite shy when it comes to communicating, because it's all about communication in the third house, and it's all about your interactions within the community and within that environment, and about sharing. And it might be that all of those things are the things that actually make you feel insecure. Like, are the things you're sharing good enough? Is the way you're learning good enough? Have you got an unusual way of speaking or processing information that you feel slightly embarrassed by? So there's a lot of things going on here. It's not unheard of to see things like dyslexia or additional learning needs crop up with this kind of energy. Busy third houses in people's natal charts often show up with people who grew up with lots of siblings and lots of cousins in a really, really busy sort of family environment. So again, having Chiron here could also show that there's a certain amount of pain from coming from such a big family, that you may have got overlooked or felt that you were overlooked, that big family wasn't the great blessing that it might be for some people. So again, there's that interpretation. Third house energy can also be a bit duplicitous, in as much if you think about Gemini, and you've got the two different faces going in the different ways, the twins. So this could also be that during your early childhood or during the times when you've most needed help from other people, that there's been an issue of trust that has caused you to feel insecure, that you haven't been feeling secure enough to be able to create successful and trusting relationships with people. Chiron in this position makes life so busy that it's sometimes very difficult for you to be able to actually grasp what is actually the matter. So that's quite a tough wicket, really. The transformation that you can make through having Chiron in the third house is quite immense, because if you think about Chiron's the wounded healer in one respect, but once we get over our wounds, we become a very wise teacher and musician and creative and philosopher and doctor. So the auguries for Chiron here are actually quite great, because the third house is about learning, essentially, and communication. So once you get over your insecurities around learning and communication, there's opportunities for you to really take it to the next level. Once you start using that Chiron energy and processing and transcending some of those pains and wounds and letting go of them, there's the opportunity for you to actually become very wise and grow through it and become a teacher in your own right. The third house and the ninth house are in opposition to each other. And whilst the third house represents sort of day-to-day kind of information, the ninth house represents the sort of higher level. So if you were to become a teacher, it's more likely that you'd be a grassroots teacher, teaching people in workshops and classrooms. Possibly you'll be a teacher that helps people who have additional learning needs. It might be that in you unraveling what all of this has meant for you growing up with Chiron in your third house, it might have given you a much greater understanding of disability and inclusion and bullying and things like that. So it could be that you end up working in these ways. But the way the Chiron energy kind of makes you great or allows you to rise up is in the way that you do things in a community-based environment. So when you know that you've won with your Chiron energy, if you're born with natal third house Chiron, you know you've won it because you're giving back and you're doing something within the community, or you're doing something with small groups of children, or you're doing something to help small families and community. So it's very much communal, and it's very much about people being recognised for being different, or being recognised for the way they learn, or being recognised for different belief systems, different languages, etc. So again, this could also show up in the chart of somebody whose parents emigrated and you had to learn a new language suddenly. These things all come up. And actually that's quite a good little sort of segue into transiting Chiron in the third house. So irrespective of where your Chiron is, when it goes through your third house, it's moving away from the second house energy of questioning your assets and questioning your possessions and questioning your attachments, and going into the third house where it's a lot more generous, and where your wisdom is being called upon to be shared, and where you're preparing to learn to a higher level and to share that more magnificently. So let's just take a step back to the second house. What you learnt when Chiron was transiting through the second house was that the things that you're attached to might be causing you pain, and the values that you put on your life might actually be causing insecurities in you, and might actually be creating an unfair world that goes against your prime motivation to heal the world. So once you've got to grips with the idea that your attachments don't really represent who you are, and that the things that you value you can let go of, it's not going to kill you probably. Once you've released some of those attachments and reevaluated who you are through the process of Chiron going through the second house, you then get the chance to teach it and to share that, and to grow confident of sharing your voice. So this can come up at a time when people have been through some intense learning and now are beginning to campaign. You might see it in people who are activists. You might see it in people who have just learnt something about the world that they're quite shocked by, and they've been mulling it over and they've been making changes in their life, and now they're ready to say to everybody, come on, wake up, wake up, wake up. So it is quite an awakening chironic position to have, because the desire to teach is very, very strong. And what often happens at the start of Chiron going through a third house is that the urge to teach is so strong that the teaching comes out more as a preach. And it might be that you initially start turning people off because you're starting to sort of campaign and talk things up to people who aren't necessarily ready. As Chiron moves towards the end of this house, the real learning, if you choose to pick up on it, is to know when it's okay to share your belief systems and to know when it's okay to teach. And to start building a community around you, not necessarily one that's exclusive, but you start building great people around you in preparation for the next phase, which is when Chiron saunters into your fourth house. And I say that very nonchalantly because, trust me, when Chiron goes over your cusp between the third and the fourth house, the fourth house cusp, which is known as the IC, the Imam Kohli, all sorts of things happen because it's such a very important angle. So it might be that as Chiron is moving through your third house, one of the things that you do is collect some useful resources in people that you can trust, because they will be very, very useful for the next phase. Talking about people and building communities around you, it's not unusual during this time to find yourself a lot more social than you were, say, in the previous Chiron phase. So it often represents a phase when you're a lot more commercial, when you're going through things like promotions, or it might show a spell when you're quite busy work-wise, and that you get the pain of overworking. But it's a highly, highly social place, and one where a lot of the learning, rather than you finding a guru, as you might in the first house, or a self-help teacher when it goes through the second house, what happens in the third house is everyone becomes your teacher. They're all around you, and your learning, your spiritual acceleration happens because you're putting yourself into actual real life and having real life situations reflected back to you. So quite a strong Chiron thing, possibly not as painful as the second house. There's a lot less riding on your ego and your identity when it's in the third house. In the second house, it's all about how you value yourself and perceive yourself. By the time the third house comes along, you're a lot less serious about who you are, which is a good thing. Anyhow, hope this has been useful. Onwards into the fourth house. Maybe see you there. Take care.
You've been listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson, and this recording has been made possible by all you lovely supporters at Patreon. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.